As we continue to shed light on Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I am speaking with survivors, and our next survivor has overcome narcissistic abuse. Some of you may not even know what narcissistic abuse is, so if you don't, stay tuned because it's definitely going to shed some light on that issue and how you too can overcome. Let's go.
Yes, it's an action.
As you all know, October is considered Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I'm speaking to survivors of domestic violence. And Amy Malkan is one of those survivors. She's going to talk to us all about how she overcame narcissistic abuse. So, hey, Amy, how are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, like, what I've been doing throughout this month is being able to talk to different women who have overcome some type of abuse. And the reason why I chose you as one of those women, because one of the things that we have not shed a lot of light on is the abuse that doesn't look like physical.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we know those, like if you've gone through physical abuse, domestic violence. But when it comes to something that's emotional, verbal abuse, narcissistic abuse, it's a little bit more difficult to actually get people to understand what that looks like. And some people are actually living it right now, but don't know that that's what it is because they haven't heard the name. So that's the reason why I chose you to come on so we can talk about this and shed more light so other people can get out of the situations as well.
Sure. I think it's for other people to get out of the situation and for the support system to understand the mindset of that person who is being abused, because a lot of times we'll be like, well, I don't understand why she's taking that or why he's taking that, because abuse is not gender specific. So a man can also be abused psychologically, mentally, even physically. And understand why that person is allowing that abuse too. So I hope that that will be conveyed, during our conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we even dive into it, when you were going through,
This is real life.
it is.
Real
Listen,
life.
Hi.
keep on going. Hey, Zinny Poo.
Bye-bye.
So when you were going through this situation, did you even know that it was abuse that you were encountering?
No, I didn't know it was abuse that I was encountering. I knew something was not right, but I couldn't pinpoint it because this person was a master manipulator. And what happens is that, when you get into an abusive relationship, you are not like, it doesn't start day one, right? There's a lot of what they call priming and grooming. They are grooming you. So basically, in simple words, they're brainwashing you to accept the abuse and to make you believe that it's because of you as to why these certain experiences or scenarios are happening. So it's happening very under the radar. It's subconscious like training. You don't even realize it. And before you know it, you're in this abusive relationship. And honestly, I didn't realize I was really in an abusive relationship because I had always thought abuse centered around physical abuse, verbal abuse, and sexual abuse. And none of those three things were occurring with me. He wasn't hitting me. He wasn't physically abusive. He wasn't, degrading me like to my face, like, pointing down at me and saying mean words and name calling me. And then he obviously was not sexually abusing me either. So I didn't see myself in an abusive relationship until I was also confiding in you. And I was kind of sharing some stories. And because you'd already lived it, you saw the pattern and you saw the familiarity, and you were brave enough to say, hey, Amy, you are in an abusive relationship. This is narcissistic abuse. And I'm grateful for you to even plant that seed. And that was a long time before I even actually left. You had said that maybe it'd been a year until I actually physically had the courage and to be brave enough to leave. That's another thing, you know, a lot of people feel like, okay, I've told you it's an abusive relationship, this is not right. And then they just expect the person to like just wake up and have this epiphany and be like, okay, bye. But what most people don't understand is all the psychological manipulation that is going on in your head. And then there's so many other factors that it usually, on average, statistically, it takes 7 attempts for the victim to leave an abusive relationship. They'll have the idea, then they'll get going and some kind of fear will set in and they revert back. So there's actually 7 types of abuse. We named the 3 most common ones, and there's psychological, mental, emotional, financial. Those are the 7 main. So if you're in a financially abusive relationship, that's a big,
that's a whole nother thing. And you
thing.
know, I love that you pointed out that, you know, you didn't know that that's what it was. You were just having a conversation with your girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of the conversation, you know, you were sharing a situation that occurred. And because your girlfriend had went through a very similar situation, she was then able to actually share. Her girlfriend was me, y'all.
Yeah.
But you know, the truth is the same thing happened for me. And I think that that's what's necessary, especially in those types of situations, because you don't know. Listen, I didn't know what narcissistic abuse was until I actually was educated on it. And I was educated on it by attending an event. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm living, you know? And a lot of people don't know that that's what it is until you actually hear about it and you're in the atmosphere and you're with people that can actually share. They've been through the same things. So like you said, I was brave enough to have the conversation with you. Yes, but you also said something after that too. You was like, I didn't leave immediately. The truth is, neither did I. You know, I don't know anyone that left immediately once experiencing that, if they were experiencing it for the first time. Okay, now, you know, if you go through that relationship, that type of relationship on a different level, you know the red flags and you're like, I gotta go. But if you're experiencing it for the first time, you don't know that's what it is. You're made to think that you're crazy, you know, and
there's a lot of gaslighting happening.
Right, because there's so much gaslighting happening. So therefore, you really you're not sure in yourself. And when that is gone, that trust and belief in your own self is gone, it's so difficult to get back to that. It's a journey that has to happen. It's healing that has to happen. And it takes the right support system to help you as you're going through that process.
You know, a lot of things that I also realized during that time when I was, you know, getting abused was that I lost a lot of friends because they didn't really understand it. They'd never experienced it. So they couldn't understand why I would allow this much amount of disrespect and torment and hurt. And they just couldn't understand why, if I was complaining to them and I was, you know, visually very upset, that I still chose to make excuses for the behavior and justify it and then still be with him. Like they just could not wrap their head around it. And so I don't hold it against them, but for them, they had to set boundaries and like, I can't hear you talk about this anymore, because at some point you have to help yourself. And I can't, like, you're hurting me because you keep talking about it and I want to help you and I love you and I want to help you. So I did lose a lot of friends. I try to keep that in mind also now in the future when I talk to a girlfriend. I want to hold space for her, but I think that I am glad that some of those people held their boundaries with me and chose not to speak to me at that time after a while, because it also was like a thing that I was paying attention to. I'm like, well, something's happening here. If I'm like 1, 2, 3 friends are saying no, like something's not right here, you know, and I need to start like really opening up my eyes around this. I think on the other end is having patience. You know, if you haven't been through something like that, you won't understand it. You can't understand the psychological manipulation. I had so many girlfriends say, oh girl, I would never have allowed that. I never would taken that. He could never have done that to me. I mean, I used to say those things too. It's easier said than done, right? So I think that brings me to the next point of a misconception that people who are abused are weak people.
Come
They're
on.
not weak people. Actually, it's the very opposite.
Opposite of, yes.
Most of the people that are abused are very strong, powerful people who have not realized their strength and power. So when a narcissist sees that, they want to harness and steal that power from them. It's like, I mean, it's the Britney Spears situation, really. Britney Spears is a powerful person, has a lot of talent, and the people around her, specifically like her dad, is wanting to control that and is wanting to harness that and make her feel less than, to show like I have power over this powerful being. And that's what happens. So it is a misconception.
That's feeding their ego.
It's feeding their ego. Yeah. Like I was able to control this powerful being.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another thing I wanted to clarify. A lot of people like how what you see, what media portrays of what abuse looks like is not real life.
It's not. And I'm so happy you brought that point up because, media, period. But, like we can get so much misinformation from the media if that's our only source, right? It's so important to actually find out and know those things for yourself, because just like you, I was that same chick. I would never, girl, you better leave. And I remember a distinct prayer asking like for God to show me, like soften me, because I had no compassion at all for those that were experiencing some type of abuse because I hadn't gone through it. Right. So therefore, for me, I was just like, I don't understand why you just don't go. I mean,
and I would speak up like after I left, I would tell you, I'd be like, I think, Keisha, that's easier said than done. You've never been in a relationship. And actually, I feel like you're invalidating my feelings and you're making me feel as if I was weak and not strong and all of these emotions, which those are not true. So I really do not appreciate you saying that to me while I'm sharing and being vulnerable and transparent and sharing my story. I would literally say that. Yeah. My girlfriend.
Whoever said that. And you know what, Amy, but a lot of people don't have that, it takes courage to be able to stand up for yourself. And sometimes we don't have that courage, and especially if you've gone through years of abuse, it's very difficult for you to actually build your courage back up. So then what happens is you feel like you don't have anybody on your side. That's feel like
therapy comes into play.
Right, exactly. You feel like it's so difficult for someone to understand what's going on with you and how do I get out? And that's why therapy is so needed. Like I feel like we don't pour enough into mental health. And I feel like it wasn't until the pandemic happened where people started to realize, oh, well, I think
I'm not perfect. I actually need help.
I think we all have issues.
Yeah.
Really? But I think that plays such a huge part. And so talking about that, would you say that therapy helped you overcome?
Oh yeah, hands down, therapy helped me. I mean, I've been going to therapy on and off since I was in college, where I knew something was wrong and I didn't feel comfortable talking to my parents about it because they were part of the issue. And so I spoke to my mom and I said, look, I need to go to therapy, like help me find a therapist. I didn't really enjoy at that time going to therapy only because it was a white lady, and nothing wrong with having a white therapist, but she didn't understand the nuances of my South Asian culture. So there were things that I was telling her and some of the things that she was telling me and her advice wasn't resonating with me and wasn't really even applicable in my situation. And so until after I left actually my abusive relationship, I did find a South Asian nonprofit organization that actually specializes in helping domestic abuse victims. And part of their services is offering therapy. And so they themselves are also South Asian. So I don't have to explain a lot of things in terms of the nuances of the South Asian culture because she already gets it. So I can go straight and dive into whatever it is that I need to, like, I could be like, X, Y, and Z about my mom and dad, and she gets it. She's not having to like dig deeper and try to understand it more, And so therapy, it definitely helps. And, for me, I don't want to be I don't want to be oversharing a lot of these kind of stories with my friends because I want to spend time with my friends in a more positive manner than like venting out. Like sometimes it can be healthy, but I want to get most of that out and do most of that work with my therapist, who is licensed and certified to be able to help me through the process, whereas my friends are not. And so they could sometimes, if you're easily get manipulated and easily swayed, you could feel like you're getting pulled in all sorts of directions because you're talking to too many people. And I think at this time, when if you're in an abusive relationship or you've left one and you just feel kind of confused, this is the time to be quiet, to start rebuilding what JJ had talked about in your last interview about this, about trusting your intuition. So it's about rebuilding your intuition, trusting yourself, trusting your intuition and your gut, and find a therapist that's the right fit. And just like a little caveat, every therapist is different. It's like dating, you have to like, it's trial and error. You gotta,
It is. It
you
is.
know,
And I actually like that you said that, you found a therapist that came from the same background as you, because that's why representation matters. Like a lot of people don't get, I love that we are now seeing more of us within that realm, because a lot of people don't get, well, they're still a therapist. I don't understand why they can't help you. It's not that they can't help. They can't help me and understanding certain things that I'm going through because they're not culturally competent. Now, there are some counselors that have that multicultural competency, but there are some that do not. And that's the thing. Like you said,
you date your therapist,
like dating. If it don't work, you just go find somebody else. Don't give up. And that's one of the things too, because if you go to a therapist and they were not a good fit for you, it may deter you from wanting to try it again. I say don't. Like you have to. It's such a necessity. It's such a necessity. I remember an interview I had with Crystal Hadnot, and she was talking about you building your team. And a part of your team is if you need a life coach, if you need a nutrition coach, if you need a mental health therapist, like you need to have a team of people that service you, especially if you're in a service field. But anybody, you know what I'm saying? Like you need to have that team to help service you so you can actually go out and be the best in the world. So I love that you talked about representation in your therapist, because I feel like that makes a huge, huge difference. So knowing that was a nonprofit, could you share more about that information so we can share with others that may need some?
So this nonprofit is called Daya, and they're based out of Houston, Texas. And they'll help anyone with domestic abuse, but they primarily specialize with South Asian women and men who've experienced any type of abuse. And so they have a lot of resources that, give to help you, become independent, to be able to leave an abusive relationship and to then become an independent being and be able to take care of yourself thereafter. So, when I left, I was also financially abused, meaning that he controlled my money essentially. And any money that I received was through him. So when I left, I really didn't have much money in my bank to like go and get an apartment and start a whole new life. Right. And so Daya was able to help me, and they gave me a 6-month rent assistance. And so that helped me out. So while they were paying my rent, I was saving that money and stacking it up so that once that assistance was finished, that I had enough money to be able to then cover my own expenses.
My God, that was huge. So amazing. That is so amazing. I'm so happy you shared that, Amy, because I feel like it's necessary for people to know that the resources are out there.
You have to. I'll say this: the resources are out there, but sometimes it can be difficult, especially for people like us. And then also, if your abuse does not contain the top three, the physical, verbal, and sexual. So when I initially left, I called the Houston area's women's shelter. I called a lot of places saying I'm in this situation and I'm homeless and I need a place to live for my son and I. And they basically, in a nice way, just said I wasn't a high risk or a top priority, essentially. The state doesn't or at least the city doesn't recognize psychological abuse. They don't understand it. And then it's also hard to prove that, prove narcissistic abuse. It's a very difficult thing to prove. And so yeah, it was really difficult. There were many times where I gave up and I was deterred and contemplated suicide many times because it was just very difficult. I didn't have any support. Even the friends that said that they were going to be there for me were not there for whatever reason. I truly felt alone, and I felt so broken, and I felt just so low that I didn't even want to impose myself on anyone. Like, just, I'm just this blob. Like, can you help fix me and put me together? Like, I didn't even, it was a lot. But there was something inside of me just kept saying, don't give up, don't give up, just do a little bit. And then finally, I'm grateful that I ran across this organization that was able, they felt my pain. They saw me like, I need help. Like, please help
Yeah.
me. So I'm grateful for them.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate your transparency, because I feel like, it's very difficult for some of us to even express what it feels like going through it, and trying to overcome that situation, like what it feels like in the middle, because you're thriving, right now, you're doing great things. You've had so many great, amazing opportunities presented to you, and you're doing phenomenal things throughout the city and beyond.
Mhm.
And a lot of people didn't know the pain. They didn't know the struggle that you went through. They didn't know that part. And you being transparent with your story, I feel like it's going to help so many different people. Because just like me, it's like sometimes you don't know how to put it into words. And when
Yeah.
you find out how to do that, it's the unlock.
Yes.
It's the unlock to help you to continue to move forward, and then be able to reach back and help someone else, to help
Right.
them come
Yeah.
out of it. So that's what I appreciate about this conversation so much. And I appreciate you talking about the financial part as well, because a lot of people don't recognize that financial abuse isn't that he's the one that works and you don't,
Right.
right? That can be a part of it, but that's not the only way that the narcissist can actually financially abuse you. So
Right.
go a little bit more into that, like how you were saying that it was controlled through him.
Yeah, I mean, so each of us had our own businesses. We're in the same industry, and he has been in the industry for a lot longer than I was. So he actually had started off as my mentor, and he would subcontract some of the work to me. But then if he was feeling some type of way, then he'd be like, no, you're not a right fit. And he would do like some psychological abuse, basically saying like I wasn't a good artist or I wasn't a good fit for it. Um, and then, once I got pregnant and we had discussed actually that I was going to stay home and raise our son in the first few years of his life, which is the most precious, like in developmental phase, this was during the time when I was pregnant, talking about getting a chef, so help me cook, and a nanny to help me with Zen, and all of these things. And then when I brought the baby home, he was just like, no, you need to do all of that. Like, you're basically just made it seem as if I was being lazy. Like, I had actually a C-section, and I chose to breastfeed my son. And so even the act of like getting up and trying to breastfeed was difficult because I had just had
Yeah.
major surgery in an area that conducts all my movement. Those are like my abs. Like, that's what helps you do a lot of these things. And so there was a lot of time. And then I was breastfeeding around the clock, like 6, 7, 8 times a day, every 2 hours I'm
Whenever it's
breastfeeding and then
necessary.
diaper change. Right. And he was calling me lazy. I started picking up on things for myself when I was like, I would feel I would feel relieved if you had to go to out of town for like a week or so. I'd be like, oh, thank God. Or if you had to be away for work, or if I was making like those passive aggressive comments, like if I was with my girlfriends, I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait for him to go. And I started listening to myself, and I'm like, that's not
Yeah, that doesn't
this is
sound
not how a
healthy.
relationship's supposed to be. You should
Right.
be relieved when someone is gone. Like, these
Yeah.
are like those things started like opening up my eyes to be like, you're not in a healthy relationship if you don't feel comfortable in your own home with this person.
Yeah.
And then, he had also kicked me out of the house 3 times. And on the third time, I just realized, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I have a barely a year old son. And my son is picking up on the vibration and the energy of what's happening.
Yeah.
And he's feeling some type of way. I'm passing that down through my milk energetically of my negativity and just not feeling right. I said, this is not how I want to raise my son. Like, I want to break the curse in the generational cycle, because he also has a son from his previous marriage, which I saw firsthand some of the emotional and psychological abuse towards him as well.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not going to repeat this again. And that was really the courage for me to leave. Like, I was like, I can't do this. I don't know. I mean, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to survive, but all I know is I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm gritty. I'm a hustler, and we just don't have to figure it. It's going to be rough for a little bit, for however long it's going to be rough, but we have to figure this out. Like, I was just like, I said, I always preach over here, like, you got to take a leap of faith. Well, this is like, you got to take your own words out, take your leap, you'll survive, but you can't be in this. And it can't be any worse than what you're living here.
Come on.
Coming up next week, Amy shares more about what she's learned and how she's healed from this abusive relationship. Check out a sneak peek.
I think what healing means to me is that when if I do get triggered, when I do get triggered, because I will get triggered.
Yeah.
You're dealing with different personality types. So whether it's with a friendship or a family member or a significant other, it's how I choose to respond. That determines how healed I am. I can